Hiya Five! You are joining me from my garden today, I'm afraid, because it was just too hot to stay in the classroom to read. So you'll have to make the most of the lovely fence panels today. Right, okay, we're on to chapter 11, which is called Flight. Summer sorting into the clouds, Pip and Hans grasped the umbrella handle with all the strength they had. All around them, thunder pounded the sky like an enormous drum, and Pip winced as the rain whipped her fur. "Hold on!" Hans yelled, seeing her tremble uncontrollably. "Don't let go!" But it was too late. As the gale roared, Pip's fear grew. Watching lightning rip the darkness open with hot, jagged claws, her grip on the umbrella handle failed. "No!" Hans cried, leaping after her. Dangling with his tail still wrapped around the umbrella handle and catching her just in time, he carried her by one paw above the furious water below. Another crash of thunder threw them downwards. Grazing the crest of a wave, salty seawater stung their eyes before a sudden gust of wind burst inside the canopy and into Hans's sail. "Climb up!" Hans cried, eyes gleaming with adventure. "Now!" Pip struggled breathlessly upwards and clambered over him, quickly wrapping her tail and both arms tightly around the righted umbrella handle. The rat followed her, effortlessly pulling himself upright to stand beside her. Snatching the string for the sail once more, he harnessed the strong wind and confidently guided the umbrella into the sky. "Quick!" he yelled, over the storm furiously crashing about them. "Where is southeast? We must stay on course." I... Pip stuttered. She glanced down at the waves thrashing below, and her whiskers drooped. "I'm sorry. I couldn't hold on to it." "What? We could be flying straight into the enemy for all we know." "I'm sorry. I couldn't help it," she shouted over the gale. Her chest grew tight with shame, and she winced at the sight of his jaws hardening in frustration. "I didn't mean to." "I have an idea," he said, after a pause, "but if you don't do as I say, I'll throw you over the side." Pip nodded earnestly. He had saved her life 3 times since they met, and she wasn't about to argue with him now. Right, just before we go on, I'm going to show you how they've been hanging. So he's tipped the umbrella, he's now flying. "Take this." He handed her the end of the rope that tied the lower part of the sail to the umbrella handle. "And when I say pull," he said, taking the corresponding rope for the upper sail in his own paws, "you do it with every muscle in your body." As he loosened the handkerchief, the umbrella instantly buckled as it lost momentum and dropped through the air. The sail violently rippled and flapped, battling against the howling gale. "Ready?" Hans cried, and his eyes glowered with determination. Pip nodded and took a breath as a fresh gust of wind swirled around her whiskers. "Pull!" They yanked the ropes with all their strength, and the umbrella rocketed upwards into the black clouds. Blindly hurtling through the thick blanket of damp and gloom, Pip yelped, feeling the rope burn into her skin. "I can't hold on much longer," she cried, scrunching her eyes closed in agony. "I'm not strong enough." "Don't let go," Hans yelled through gritted teeth, his arms shaking as they struggled against the sail, shuddering dangerously against the force of the wind. "Not yet." Just as Pip feared her strength would fail her, suddenly clear air filled her lungs. The wind was no longer in a fury, and the bite of the rope in her paws ceased. Daring to open her eyes, her mouth fell open in astonishment. All around her were endless white stars, blinking in the night sky. "Now you can let go," Hans said, smiling with relief. Gently prying away Pip's fingers, he took the rope from her. Tying it to the umbrella handle, the sail grew taut, and the umbrella flew steadily over the rumbling storm clouds below. "You see those 3 stars strung together in a line?" he said, pointing to the clear night sky. "That's Orion's belt. Now look directly under the middle star. That star is Orion's sword. It will guide us south to Normandy." Fascinated, Pip gazed into the night. In London, she knew the stars were there, but they never shone like this, and she had never seen them this way before. Shapes were everywhere. "Now, look behind you," Hans said, turning with her. "There's a saucepan over there made up of 7 stars. Can you see it?" She scanned the moonlit sky, and sure enough, 7 stars made an outline of a saucepan, jauntily tipped downwards as though it was filling up with water. "That is Ursa Major. Now find the top point of the bowl," he continued, pointing to it, "and look up to the right. Do you see the little upside-down saucepan?" She nodded, entranced. "That is Ursa Minor. At the end of the handle, where it's brightest, is the North Star. Now you can find north and south. You will never lose your way." Hans looked into Pip's delighted face, and they smiled at one another, both enjoying the endless display of stars gleaming all around them, and the calm silence they brought after the storm. So That's them, flying above the storm clouds. They've gone up high. After holding her gaze a moment longer, the rat turned away with a tug of a handkerchief, sailing the umbrella swiftly southwards through the night sky. "Why are you helping me?" Pip said, plucking up the courage to ask him. "Is it because you want to go back to Germany?" "I'm an orphan too, Pip," the rat said, after a solemn pause. "I didn't have anyone to help me when my family died, and it was my grief and loneliness that made me vulnerable to the enemy. I got away just in time." Hans's expression softened. "I don't want that to happen to you. I'll take you to your family in Italy, and then I will return to Germany to finish the fight once and for all." Pip didn't dare ask more, feeling his reluctance to speak cool the air around her. She had hoped he would tell her his story, but glancing at the silvery scars torn across his fur, part of her feared knowing exactly what had happened to him. Etched into his skin forever, the violent, jagged lines cried out with suffering and filled her heart with sadness. As the night drew on, the storm faded into the distance behind them, and soon all was quiet, as though they were the last two living creatures in the world. With only the sound of the wind whistling in her ears, Pip's eyes grew heavy, her head bobbing up and down with fatigue, until she spotted a tiny white light blink from below. "What's that?" she said, suddenly feeling wide awake. She pointed her paw down to a white dot blinking in the dark ahead of them. "Down there! Look!" "Ha! It's a lighthouse," Hans said with a broad smile. "We made good time. This storm was lucky after all." Pip scowled in disagreement. "It's more Normandy." "How do you know?" "Because the lighthouse is on. It's guiding the Allied boats to the French coast, just like Ben had said." "We made it," Pip said, leaping up on the umbrella handle with excitement. "Not yet, Pip," Hans said, gravely shaking his head. "The danger is only just beginning." Okay, we'll carry on. Right, chapter 12 is called Normandy. Pip's nose twitched inquisitively as they flew closer to the shore, flying over countless black battleships, gently bobbing on slumbering seas. Ahead lay a wide stretch of sand with stark metal crosses peppered along it, the first indigo belt of sunrise revealing the jagged outline of black treetops silhouetted along the horizon beyond. The lighthouse stood taller than anything Pip had seen before, and seemed to graze the brightening sky with its dependable blinking light, protectively watching the night give way to the lofty morning clouds. "We need to land over there," Hans whispered, pointing his paws behind the lighthouse, where a small farmhouse stood at the edge of a forest. "Noah's Ark is somewhere inside those woods. We must reach it before the humans see us." The wind dwindled as they descended through the air, and no matter how hard Hans harnessed it into the sail, the breeze collected heavily inside the canopy. Before, the umbrella had confidently stormed through the sky, but now it moved with little more than a glide as it drifted over hundreds of khaki tents, tanks, and trucks parked on the beach. Dotting the war-torn landscape beyond them stood rows of upright rifles. The gun barrels were buried in the sand with metal army helmets somberly resting on the top of the rifle butts. Seeing the size and shape of the mounds of the earth beneath them, Pip's whiskers drooped with sorrow, thinking of Mr. and Mrs. Smith's son, Peter. She hoped with all her heart that none of these makeshift headstones belonged to him. Pip gasped as a cockerel crowed. The farmhouse chimney had crept directly into their path as they approached the roof. Hans yanked the sail, but the silver handle scraped harshly against the brick stack, knocking the umbrella backwards into the grey slate roof with a crash. Pip squeaked loudly in alarm. "Shh!" Hans scolded, covering her mouth with his paw as the umbrella ground to a stop, precariously hanging by its canopy from the peak of a roof. A dog growled and barked from inside the farmhouse, and in a nearby field cows looked up from where they grazed in surprise. Pip and Hans froze, hearing thudding footsteps before a door swung open, banging against a wall as a black and white sheepdog rocketed from inside the house. "Qua! Qua!" the farmer cried over the dog's incessant barking. His grey hair was scattered madly upon his head with sleep, and he impatiently wrapped his dressing gown about him to ward off the early morning chill. "What is it?" Pip and Hans held their breath, both terrified their clamouring hearts would give them away. The sound of the breeze rustling through the nearby trees echoed, the waves lapping the shore, and the farmer, seeing and hearing nothing out of the ordinary, dragged the dog inside by its collar and slammed the door closed behind him. "We need to run and jump off this roof," Hans said, immediately leaping to his paws and pointing to the first wisps of white cloud in a tangerine sky. "The sun is rising, and we are sitting ducks if we stay here. We need cover from the forest, and G.I. Joe is waiting for us there with the resistance." "All right," Pip nodded, staring into the thick, rugged woodland, wondering how many creatures lurked there unseen. "But if we're to get a good glide, we'll need to get a good run up from the highest part of the roof. Come on," she said, hurrying up inside the open umbrella canopy with Hans at her heels. "Now push," she cried, and the rat joined her, shoving the umbrella along the peak of the roof with their paws. As it scraped roughly along the slate tiles, Pip's chest grew tight with fear, hearing the sheepdog bark angrily from inside the house once more. "Get ready to jump," Hans said. 1, 2, 3, go." As the umbrella tipped over the edge of the roof, they leaped to the metal stretchers inside the canopy and dangled from them, swinging back and forth. The open umbrella instantly filled with air, silently gliding into the trees and finally coming to rest on a bed of brown leaves. "Follow me," Hans said, swiftly climbing out of the umbrella. "Let's close this thing and get out of here." Hurrying, Pip pressed the secret carved fig leaf again and collapsed the canopy. Carrying it above their heads, they scurried across the ground into the wilds ahead. A throng of trees loomed above them, creaking one after another as if quietly talking to each other in a secret language. Ground ferns trembled with disturbance, scattering early morning dewdrops to the earth. Something was moving swiftly alongside them on the ground. "What was that?" Pip said, hearing a rustle beside her. "Nothing," Hans said, quickening his pace. "Keep moving." Suddenly, a low growl sounded, and a flash of grey fur exploded from the undergrowth, throwing Hans out from beneath the umbrella. As it flew from Pip's grasp, she cowered in horror, watching a tabby cat leer over Hans as he lay stunned on the ground. "What a juicy rat," the cat purred, rolling her R's and licking her lips. "Delicia." "Stop!" an eagle cried, flapping his powerful speckled wing and landing on the ground next to the cat with a limp. A slim white pigeon settled next to him and fluttered her eyelids. Looking Hans up and down, they all recoiled at his scarred face and body. With a gasp, Pip stepped backwards and hit a wall of fur. Blocking her path was a tall, muscular rabbit, looking down his twitching nose at her. Another hopped beside it, from the undergrowth, while squirrels stared from lofty branches, flicking their bushy red tails. "Don't touch them until Madame has spoken to them," the eagle said firmly. "They may have information." "Wait, let me explain," Hans said, with beads of sweat bubbling on his brow. Hearing his accent, the cat growled and tightened her claws around his chest. "A German," she hissed, and curled her lips around her white fangs. "Enemy spies," the eagle called, and his golden eyes narrowed with fury. "No," Pip cried. "We've come from London." "Silence, traitor," the cat snarled, and her eyes dilated with savageness. "Take them to Madame," screeched the eagle. "Now." "Oh dear, sounds like they've run into some baddies." Right, okay, we will be back again next week with the next part of the story. I will see you then. Have a lovely weekend. Bye.